I love it. The microphone is at German height.
It is, yeah. It is. Yeah, maybe the test again, if you could say.
Hello, test.
Okay, seems great. All right, so I have the pleasure, or it's a great honor of mine to talk to you. I'm sitting here with Robby from Animoca Brands, none other than the CEO of Animoca Brands.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.
Not at all, happy to be here.
I think at this point, nearly everybody in crypto should be familiar with Animoca, but well, since you're kind of building an empire, like your reach is very far-reaching, your footprint is like global.
Yes.
It would be very nice if you kick off the conversation with just a brief overview of what Animoca brand is doing, how it started out, and what you're currently focusing on.
No problem. So Animoca Brands is a Hong Kong headquartered business. We started out originally as a mobile game company. This is about, how long ago? Almost 15 years ago now. And we were a Web2 mobile game company for many years. And we focused, as you can tell from the name of the business, on leveraging brands. So we worked with lots of third-party IPs, you know, Garfield, Doraemon, Ultraman, Astro Boy, etc. And we made games based on those IPs. And then in 2017, we discovered blockchain. And this was kind of a light bulb moment for us, because when we discovered blockchain, it happened because we were working with a small team in Canada who had a hackathon project, and the idea behind that project was to see if they could tokenize content in a game. So they actually invented the NFT for the purpose of this game. And the game was called CryptoKitties. And we were the publishers of CryptoKitties in Greater China, and the team became known as Dapper Labs eventually. And it was this experience working with them and learning from them about the power of tokenization and the power of digital ownership that we decided very quickly that we were going to focus the entire business and all our efforts making games on trying to make them in Web3. And the reason was very simple, because when we looked at Web3, the idea of digital ownership, of using virtual currency to buy virtual items, digital items, was something that as a gamer we innately understand. Gamers have been doing this behavior for decades. And so to explain to a gamer that they must use virtual currency to buy virtual stuff doesn't require any explanation. You don't have to teach them. And so we thought bringing gamers into Web3 was a natural extension and a way to really broaden the adoption of Web3 and crypto generally.
Great, it's amazing, because CryptoKitties, I mean, it's the first breakthrough or breakout gaming experience with Web3 features, so everybody's familiar with them. And since then, I guess most people are quite like expecting Web3 gaming to really lead us to mass adoption. I think it's the category like highly discussed as the next billion, onboarding next million users.
Yes.
Where do we stand currently in Web3 gaming? What are the most like recent developments you're seeing?
Sure. So I think the idea behind why we think Web3 gaming will lead to mass adoption in Web3 is really because of what's happened in gaming generally over the last decade. So because of the advent of mobile as a distribution platform for games, gaming has become the biggest entertainment medium. So many people don't realize that actually gaming is bigger than feature film and television and music combined, right? It's much bigger than all other forms of media. But the reason is because I think people don't realize this is because there's an old stereotype of what it means to be a gamer. People think of gamers as young men with headsets on in front of their consoles, you know, playing first-person shooters. But that's not all gamers. Actually, the majority of gamers play puzzle games on their mobile phones. Think of, you know, 180 million people a day playing Candy Crush on their mobile phone. These are all gamers, right? And because of mobile, we have brought another 4 billion people around the world into the world of games. So that's why gaming actually has so much power. So mobile doubled the size of the game industry. We went from 100 billion a year in revenues to 200 billion a year in revenues, thanks to mobile. Now, for Web3, of course, we think gaming is going to lead to mass adoption because new consumer technology is generally, adoption of it is generally driven by entertainment. That's why people do new stuff. Why did people gravitate towards the internet? Well, email, yes, but mainly entertainment, right? We wanted to look at content on the internet. We read magazines and newspapers, and later we watched videos, and you do all kinds of things online to entertain yourself, right?
Yeah.
And work is kind of a secondary.
Yeah.
And we think the same thing is true of blockchain. Blockchain has incredible use cases for supply chain verification, but that doesn't get people excited to adopt on a mass basis. But if you can play a fun game, lots of people will play a fun game, right?
Yeah.
And in the case, as we saw of Axie Infinity 2 years ago, if you can play a fun game and maybe make a profit while you do it, of course that excites even more people.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of different things that lead people to adopt technology, and we think entertainment is the biggest vector.
And is the play to earn model like still the biggest adoption driver you see, or are there other models like developing?
I think the important thing, and I was actually just having this discussion with a gentleman I met here at the conference, I think the most important thing when we as builders in Web3 think about building games is we want, like Web3 is essentially an open source movement at its heart, philosophically. It's the idea of breaking down silos between software applications so that we can actually move assets from one place to another and have true ownership, and also so that we can have interoperability between those assets.
Yeah.
And a key aspect of that philosophically is user choice. I want to have possession of my assets. I want to choose how much personal information I share. I want to have the power, because this is a reaction to centralized, particularly social media platforms, where the centralized platforms have all the power, and we, the users, are actually, you know, the machine, the food for the machine, so to speak. So I think the important thing in Web3 is to build applications that are as inclusive as possible, that give as much freedom of choice to as many different kinds of users as possible. So to go back to your question, play to earn is a very important part of the gaming business models that are available, but it's only one part. It's, in my mind, one player category. A certain kind of gamer would like to earn money playing the game. Others just want to have fun and don't want to spend too much money. Others may want to trade assets because the trading is the game for them, right? And different people have different interests. So it's challenging for developers because we need to make a game that actually has a little bit of something for everybody.
And you're basically like arguing that the main benefit is the true like ownership of digital assets.
Yes.
And is it from when you would have to narrow it down to what is the benefit behind it, like the underlying benefit? Is it to have the financial option to cash out if you do not want to participate in the game anymore, or do you see it rather as a building block for an interoperable like gaming universe, which has like the bigger utility?
Okay, so since I'm in Germany, we're going to talk philosophy now. So I think you have to get philosophical about this, because one of the things that we want to think about in Web3 is we want to think about what is the impact of digital ownership. Ownership is fundamental to how we think about society and how we think about building asset value in society. And so when you think about most people, what is the biggest asset that they have? It's probably their home, if they're lucky enough to own their home, or their car. And these assets represent the ability for them to create wealth, but they also represent the ability for them to create a business. I could take a second mortgage on my house and get a loan and start a business. And so having this asset gives me optionality in life. And the problem that we have in Web 2 is that in digital space, everything is valued essentially at zero, because all digital items are infinitely copyable, so they're worthless, essentially. In Web 3, we have the ability to have these digital property rights, so that means we can start to build asset value. And if you think about it, the biggest asset class in the world is real estate, property. And in digital space, we have zero asset value, and yet most of us spend anywhere from 6 to 10 hours a day online in digital space. And yet most of our waking hours we're spending in a place where we build zero value. So why shouldn't we be able to build asset value in digital space? So let me give you a simple example. Again, we're in Germany, which is kind of the spiritual home of the automobile, right? And so if you think about the automobile in Web3 terms, the automobile is an open and composable asset, because the automobile does not care what road you drive it on. When you buy a BMW, you do not need permission from BMW to drive only on BMW roads. But when you buy a digital asset, that's what happens in software today. You need to have permission to use your software in one place or another, right?
Yeah.
But because the car is an open asset, then you can drive anywhere you want. Not only can you do that, I can start an insurance company and sell you insurance. I can start a repair shop and repair your car. I can make tires. I can start Uber, right? All of these businesses can be created because this open asset exists.
Yeah.
And so now when we expand from the car, it might be a stretch to some people's imaginations, but think of a Bored Ape PFP. It's also an open asset, right? And so what are going to be the Ubers and the Shell Oils of the Bored Ape ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
Because these are open assets upon which other people can build businesses.
Yeah.
And so an example of that would be a game we launched last week, which is called Rec League. And this is now a PFP fighting game which uses the Bored Ape IP. And we can use that IP because it's open and it's an open asset. And so we welcome Bored Ape IP holders to come with their apes to play in our game.
I mean, this is the magic of permissionless
100%.
blockchain infrastructure, right? That you have composable building blocks that can build upon each other.
Yes.
It is also the main reason for Hugh in investing in like 450 or over 450 companies, that you see them at one point like really tying all the knots together and interoperate.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, and it just occurred to me, I think the analogy is it's like going from having only trains to having cars, right?
Yeah.
And the idea behind our portfolio ecosystem is we actively encourage all our portfolio companies to try to work together. And we don't want to do that to the exclusion of other people, because I'm more than happy to have them work with everybody in the Web3 ecosystem. I'm a firm believer in the network effects of interoperability. I think because we all adhere to the same principles of openness, and we respect intellectual property, and we respect creator royalties, this is very important, then there is always a benefit to sharing and an incentive to share and to work together. And as we've proven with incredible open source projects like Linux, when we share and work together, the power of developers to collaborate across the internet is infinitely bigger than the biggest company could ever be. So the innovation will be, limitless.
And how far are we away from a blockchain world where like each protocols can interoperate in the Web3 gaming space? Do we already have like standards people build on, or how do you see these developments? Okay, so we're still, realistically, I would say we're still probably 2 years away to seeing quite a number of products building on similar standards. This is where I need to plug a non-profit organization that we're involved with called OMA3, or the Open Metaverse Alliance for Web3. And this is essentially a foundation that we created together with many other companies, I think 30 other companies in the Web3 space. And the idea was this interoperability that you're talking about is very hard. It's very hard to implement technically. And it's not just technical problems, but it's questions of philosophy as well. If I have an NFT project where every NFT is red and you have Blue World, must it be blue when I bring it to Blue World? Who gets the right to say? So there are many questions to answer for this. So we created this foundation so that we would have a venue for companies and builders to share and brainstorm and try to come up with standards together, because what we want is we want these standards to be built from the ground up by the community. These need to be standards that work for and benefit everybody. And the last thing we want is, like many other things in technology, we don't want to sit around and wait for a big tech giant from Silicon Valley to come and tell us what the new standard is, and by the way, they have the patent on it. That's not what we want for Web3, because it's not in the spirit of Web3. So we want to try to figure out how we can best create standards that benefit the whole community. Maybe just to continue our conversation on collaboration and partnerships, you're also like huge in the IP business, right? So you're like working together with huge brands, creating early metaverse experiences, really trying to engage their customers and build synergies.
Yes.
What are the insights you're currently like gaining from your conversations with big brands? How bullish are they still like on metaverse experience, for instance, for the sandbox?
Sure. So I think big brands are still quite bullish on metaverse experiences, and I think that it is a matter of helping work closely with them, because the type of executions and the type of opportunities for them to connect with customers have never really been done before. We're presenting them with tools which nobody's ever used. So the challenge, not problem, the challenge is we have to create precedence each time, right? And so what we're trying to do is lean into what Web3 does best, which is building on these permissionless assets. So thinking about how we can engage communities of customers in this case, or fans of a brand, but across multiple experiences. Because the beauty of Web3 is once somebody has an NFT, we can recognize them as that NFT holder. Whether that NFT is a collectible, or a piece of digital merchandise, or a digital twin of a physical merchandise that I purchased, and we can use that recognition capability for a loyalty program. We can use it to invite people to in-person events and act as tickets for those events. And so it's really up to the marketing departments, if these are marketing initiatives, to think about creative campaigns to leverage all these new technologies. And so we've seen some great executions, but the reality is you have to also, it's like advertising, you have to have great creative teams to result in great executions.
And if there are big brands like tuning into our conversation, are there any recommendations you can give them on how to enter Web3 strategies?
Well, first, call us.
Obviously.
but besides that, I think the strategy really is to find companies to work with like in any business that can demonstrate at least some track record of having had experience in the space, because it is very new. And the technology is literally changing every week. And so keeping up with the pace of change and understanding how best to connect with customers is very important. And I think you need to think about your investment for the long term, because it's about building your brand in a new market demographic. Because a lot of the kind of people you're going to connect with in Web3, there will be, this Venn diagram of overlap with some of your existing customers, but also you'll be onboarding a lot of new customers, because Web3 is a very diverse community. Web3, is very active in countries that are not necessarily tier 1 demographic countries, right? Web3 is very popular in the global south, for example. And because you have the ability to connect with customers through digital products, which they can purchase directly from you without having to have financial infrastructure like credit cards and bank accounts and things like that, you can actually reach out and generate revenues from customers all over the world without having to go through all the hurdles of that financial infrastructure. And the perfect example of that would have been Axie Infinity, again, to go back to this example, where they have 2.5 million players in the Philippines who are spending money every day on products, and most of these people they're not necessarily part of the global financial system, but they're happy to spend 5, 10, 20 euros a time on digital goods. And so they're opening up whole new demographics.
Since you're wearing this Mocaverse t-shirt, I just have to refer to that, because you just recently announced some fundraising for this project. Could you give a brief overview of what you're building with Mocaverse?
Sure. So what we want to do with Mocaverse is really lean into the capabilities of Web3 to think about how we would build a project to codify the idea of community. Because as everybody talks about, one thing Web3 does amazingly well is act as glue for communities and enable communities to organize online, and the height of organization would really be the DAO, because we now have a way for disparate communities on the internet to organize and actually have financial power and legislative power similar to governments and banks and other things, because we have secure voting, right? And so we want to harness this power to try to find a way to recognize all the people in the broader Animoca community. And by this we mean anybody who we touch, whether they are customers of our businesses, portfolio companies we invest in, shareholders, employees, doesn't matter. Anybody who is 1 or 2 degrees of separation from us is part of the broader Mocaverse community. So we started with an NFT project so that we can give people NFTs to recognize that they're members of the community. And then now we're moving to create what we call the Moca ID, which is essentially an ID system that will be obviously based on open and permissionless assets, that will recognize all of the people in this ecosystem and help them to accrue history. Because we want to recognize their contributions to the community. And so people will earn credit and essentially provenance.
Reputation, right?
Reputation, by being positive actors and positive forces in the community.
Okay.
And that way we know who is most valuable to the community, and also we can give people benefits in exchange for them being valuable to the community, and we can lean into and promote positive directions for the community by finding out who's contributing.
And is this like potentially kind of an identity layer for the whole Animoca universe, or do you
Correct.
see it isolated? No.
No, for the whole Animoca universe.
Okay.
And beyond, if other people want to adapt it just to work with our community, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
Right? And I think it's important to note that this is not something that, we want to be like the ID standard for Web3. It's not to the exclusion of other players. It's just, here's something for our community, and if you want to work with our community, here's an easy way to connect into them.
Okay, nice. Maybe just to close this conversation on a more high level, besides or beyond Animoca, what are you currently most excited about when it comes to crypto trends and developments? Are you also focusing on the infrastructure, Ethereum, Solana layer? Where are your eyeballs following here?
So thinking literally, Web3 changes so quickly, but thinking just about, what I've been paying attention to in the last week or so, I've actually been thinking about 2 things. One is a broader trend, which is AI. And I think that for me, the excitement in thinking about AI is as we start to think about AI actually working in crypto on our behalf, meaning not just like MEV bots and things like this, but AI actually being able to write smart contracts, to deploy code, and to act autonomously. So when we think about AI starting to tokenize assets generatively, that's quite exciting. And we're already starting to use AI for things like smart contract auditing and to help us in our development processes. So to think about the ways in which we can accelerate the development of Web3 because AI is helping us to do so, that's very exciting, because when we think about the conversation of interoperability, one of the questions always is, okay, so I have this NFT asset in this game, and I have this game, and they're quite different. How do we translate it? Well, actually, AI can start to figure out how to translate it, how to render these, this pixels into this kind of pixel resolution, etc. So we don't actually have to solve the problem anymore. So I think AI can be a great vector for solving some of those tools. And the second thing I've been playing with actually is FriendTech. Yes. And the reason I've been playing with FriendTech, obviously because everybody's talking about it and I want to see what's going on, but the thing that excites me most about FriendTech is less about the specific application than about the distribution channel. Because I think the way that they've leveraged the progressive web app on the mobile device is quite interesting.
It is.
And we see that they've actually been quite successful in onboarding a great number of users to a web application on a mobile device, which essentially does not involve the app stores. And I think that this is great because it allows them, this is not about, whether or not we should be paying app stores 30% fees and stuff. I think that's a commercial issue and not relevant. What it is about it's about being able to deploy Web3 apps with full functionality on mobile where you can really engage Web3 Rails. And so as a demonstration of what's possible, I think it's really interesting because this is an early view. This is a little bit like a CryptoKitties, right, moment for how we can think about doing things on mobile.
So if you're thinking about the next gaming projects you guys are working on, they started out as a desktop-oriented gaming projects, and now there could be a potential way for them to enter mobile phone area.
Absolutely. Well, and also don't forget there are plenty of game companies that are successfully deploying Web3 on mobile, and some of them are really pushing the envelope. You know, we're an investor in Mythical, and they have NFL Rivals, which has been doing amazing things in trying to really work with Apple specifically on how to operate within Apple's guidelines and to add as many Web3 features as possible, and also to think together with their partners at Horizon through the tokenomics of how can we operate in this, you know, Apple TNC environment and pay all the requisite fees and recognize gas and value, etc., because it further complicates the token economy. And so it's another challenge to be developed.
It's generally, just like as a last question for this conversation, but it's generally tokenomics the most like challenging question when developing a game, because it's actually quite resembling building a whole economy, but with like predicting future gaming behavior, right?
Yes, 100%. It's why actually we have a huge tokenomics team that work across our game studios and across our portfolio companies, and in fact work with, you know, third parties, brands, etc., in helping them think through tokenomics, because tokenomics is very complex. And I think people underestimated its complexity in the early days and thought, well, we'll hire some economists and it'll be easy. But actually, tokenomics is very complex, and you need to have people who are accustomed to, you know, designing very complex systems. We found actually physicists are quite good at this. And getting it right is very important. And building, you know, if I can give advice to anybody out there who's building tokenomics, I think one of the key things that you need to think about is building for sustainability, because the idea behind building an open economy is longevity. You want it to last. And you cannot build it for one outcome or another outcome, because when it's open, you can't control it. So you need to just try to put some buffers around the edges to try to make sure it's as sustainable as possible, but it will move up and down within those buffers and do whatever it does, and that's beyond your control, but you want it to last. And if it lasts, it will build value over time.
Well, this is an amazing thought for the end of our conversation. Thank you very much. It was very insightful. Thank you for taking the time.
No problem. It was a pleasure chatting.
Enjoy the conference.
Thank you.